This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Okay, at 7:30, I'd like to call the meeting to order. First off, it's great to be home again. Wonderful to be back between these four walls. And note that we are being televised, and please use the button on the microphone when you wish to say something. Be a little better than last time, a little more informal. I don't find that I feel so presidential sitting amongst you as opposed to above you. So, but that's the way it should be. Okay, first order of business, or next order of business, minutes from the meeting of July 17, 2009. Everybody was at that meeting. You had it in your packet. Are there any additions or corrections anybody would like to make? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Second? Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Financial statements. Jason?
Good morning. I'll introduce myself first since this is my first meeting. I'm Jason Roloff. I'm a budget analyst with the City of Eau Claire. I'm excited to be here, excited to meet all of you. Attached is the RDA budget and actuals report from as of August 31st, 2019. The fiscal year RDA operating expenditures totaling for as of August 31st, 2019 are $55,316. Expenditures include $708 for personal costs associated with upkeep of RDA-owned properties, $42,352 for contractors to repair and maintain RDA properties, and $3,533 for utilities, and $8,723 for contributions and payments. Contractual service expenses include $21,543 in July 2019 for costs associated with the Cannery Redevelopment District. And sale of land revenue in August 2019 includes the sale of 1704, 1714, 1716, 1720, and 1724 Oxford Avenue, 1719 Mapa Street, and 106 Cameron Street, collectively for $206,196.
Questions? Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the financial statements as presented? So moved. Second? Okay, moved and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much. A very good first presentation.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is the Vanderwall and Associates presentation on the Cannery District redevelopment revisions.
Good morning. We're making good progress on the revision plan for the Cannery District. We have been working with Vanderwall Associates. They've been putting a lot of time and effort into together and community feedback. And this morning we have Scott Harrington with Vanderwall Associates, who's here to walk you through where we're at today and get feedback from the committee as we move forward. So turn it over to Scott. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Morning.
Morning.
Now I had the pleasure of meeting some of you when we were here back. It was in June. Nice to meet the rest of you. Really enjoyed working on the project and look forward to discussing it this morning. I do have kind of a brief presentation. I think all of you got this information in your packet for the benefit of those at home and those here who haven't seen the information. I'll kind of give an overview. The staff conducted a kind of a neighborhood meeting at the end of last week, and so what we thought we would do is I'll kind of give an overview of our ideas and some of the stuff we came up with. Aaron will then kind of cover what they heard at the neighborhood last week. I know there's also then been some discussion with Parks about their thoughts on some of the open spaces that we had planned. And so that will be provided, and then you'll kind of have everything and we can kind of talk about where do we want to go from there. And so we'll kind of get it started here if I can figure it out. Great. So as you know, there was a plan done for this area not too long ago, I think back in 2014. And there was also a larger West Riverside District plan. So we really did study those plans, and there's a lot of good information in both. So this wasn't necessarily starting from scratch at all. It was really fine-tuning, with one of the focuses being what should be the balance between private development and public development, or public open space within the district, along with a couple of other objectives that I'll cover. So just wanted to acknowledge the work that was done before, and that it was very helpful and informative in driving a lot of our decisions. When we start any project, we really need to understand what's the context that we're working in. So you're all very familiar with where the area was, but it was important for us to gain that understanding of not only this area's relationship to its immediate neighborhood, but how it connects to downtown, how it connects across Madison Street to Mayo, and frankly all the way to University. So we did kind of look at that. We listed some of the kind of key assets for the area and its context. Then kind of focusing in a little bit more closely of what's happening in the area and what those key assets are, especially being on the river. The other great thing that you know about this site and area is that you own so much of it, so you really have an ability to control. A lot of times when we do planning processes like this, in a district like this, most of the land is under private ownership, and it's often very fractured, which makes redevelopment a real challenge on assembling sites. So the fact that you've kind of already done that should really facilitate some immediate implementation, and I know Aaron's already been working on that. And you guys already have one project approved and others moving ahead. So that's really exciting to us to see the ability to kind of bring the work to life pretty immediately. We did create a vision statement based on those past plans, based on the folks that we met with in June and our own thoughts. And I'll just kind of read this quickly, that the Eau Claire Cannery District is a rebirth, vibrant, multi-use riverfront area where people live, recreate, and make things to the benefit of the Upper West Side neighborhood, users of the Chippewa Trail, nearby businesses and institutions, the downtown renaissance, and the city as a whole. So I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but I think one of the other key things in this process was to try to give the area an identity. Maybe that was something that was lacking in the last planning effort, where there was a lot of development plan, but what does this area want to be? What is its identity? What is kind of its brand? And this idea of making things, given the history of the area as a cannery and its long history in lumber prior to that, seemed to fit in with that. Next slide really looks at the opportunities that the area presents. There's an awful lot going on in that map. But I'll try to maybe highlight a couple of things. And we don't have a pointer or anything, do we? Okay.
Maybe use the mouse phone,
Okay, great. So these kind of orange blobs, where we kind of dissected the area, where could development occur when you look at what you've assembled and what's available. We kind of identified these three primary areas. So this upper one, we refer to as the high point, and we later call it the heights. It's close to the high bridge, really steep bank down to the river, but outstanding views to this beautiful bridge and the river. Coming in more towards the middle, we're very creative here calling this the center. But a lot of possibilities there, including how does Kessler Park fit into this? There's the neighborhood park on sort of the west end side of this area. Do we shift that over to the east side? And so there are a couple of options that we'll talk about for that. And then down here, kind of more in this district core for the commercial that's really anchored off of two outstanding uses that you have now. One is the brewing project and the other being the children's theater. But a couple other things that I think that are really important here that I really want to note. One is that there is a commercial district on 3rd over here, and some good uses there, but could use some strengthening. And so tying the new development back to this commercial area, both visually, vehicularly, if that's a word, pedestrians, to help reinforce this existing commercial center, I thought was important. Likewise, there's a lot of traffic moving north to south through here that kind of now comes all the way over to Oxford and down. Not the greatest of movements, and we really thought cutting that over and bringing it down more towards Mayo's main entrance would be a much better solution to move traffic, and so there wouldn't be as much through traffic through this part of the project. So I think that solves some traffic issues. I think it helps, again, create an identity for this area while still tying it to the neighborhood. And so that's the suggestion that we have, is to, instead of bringing it all the way over here, cutting it a couple blocks short, bringing it in, and then that really strengthens that tie with Mayo. Our project scope really did not include looking at Madison Street in any detail, but it is the front door to the area. We know that the two uses that kind of flank our entry over here are pretty well locked in and aren't likely to change. And it's great that those are successful, but they wouldn't necessarily have been our first choice for how we would want to enter the district with a gas station and a dollar store. But that's okay. But I do think that in the near future that the RDA should be looking kind of at Madison Street and what's happening in this corridor. With this powerhouse of an employment center and a regional draw, I think there's a lot more opportunity on Madison Street than it currently reflects. And I think there's a real opportunity to look at some significant redevelopment along this corridor that, again, would strengthen its tie to the district and to the neighborhood and be an overall improvement to this kind of west side of the river. So those are just a few of the things that I wanted to point out. One of the things that coming into this, relatively new, I will admit prior to starting this project, I'd only sort of driven through Eau Claire a few times and not really spent much time here, and was really impressed with what you've accomplished downtown in your redevelopment, but then also the natural environment, and was really intrigued by what we have labeled here as this beach. But if any of you have taken the time to walk down the slope, which I know is a bit of a challenge, and get to kind of the sandy bottomland when it's not flooding, it's really amazing. You're in the middle of the city, but you feel like you're on Gilligan's Island. I mean, it's very isolated, it's very serene, it's all sand and pretty wide open, and just an outstanding feature that I think really wasn't fully appreciated in the past plan that we could see, and something that I think really ought to be a highlight of this area. So getting down to that is certainly a challenge and something that needs to be looked at and how that can be done safely, and also recognizing that the flood water in that area can be pretty high, so that whatever does get put there needs to be able to deal with that. But it's an outstanding amenity that was really, I think, undervalued. Not that we wouldn't have more open space up on top, but that ought to be a big part of it. The profile along the riverbank does change, though. So, I talked earlier about the high point. These are drawn to scale, so you can see that this is a much deeper and steeper drop up on this north end versus what we see more in the center and towards the bottom. The other thing, too, is beyond just the drop to the river is a drop kind of through our development site coming off of First. And I think that we really tried to put that to use in terms of how we lined First Street and take up that change in elevation, and with maybe parking access from the east, so that you had like a multi-level townhome, a pretty standard format that you see where there's parking on the first level and living on the upper two. But the upper two, the first living level would essentially be at grade with First Street, so you'd have a front door. You wouldn't be coming down First Street looking at a lot of garages because they're kind of behind the building in the back. I think that's a real exciting opportunity for some real quality urban design. Wrong button. Okay. So we did create some strategies before getting into more detailed design and concepts. One was creating and promoting a district sense of place. So what's kind of the brand, what's the feel, what is this place, not just a collection of buildings, but how does it really hang together and become something that is identifiable, but is still at the same time really integrating with its adjoining neighborhood. Continuing to engage with local businesses as district partners, that'll be important as the project moves forward, and I mentioned earlier about trying to strengthen and tie back out to Third. Highlighting the natural features, and then integrating and serving the existing residents. So from a development perspective, looked at these kind of 4 different development areas. So those are kind of what's labeled here, and then kind of over here as well. First area is, I'll kind of work north to south. Along the riverfront in this kind of high area here, we've kind of termed this the Heights. What we show in this concept is 3 buildings. I know there's some input from the residents about 3 versus 2. I think what's really important about the plan and wanting to get feedback from you today is the idea of trying to push both density and value. This is, as you know, in a tax increment district. While we show less public open space than the previous plan, there's still quite a bit here, and there's still a lot of improvements that are needed. There's a whole road that's needed through this area. So there's a lot of demands on the TIF, not the least of which will also come from development, as you're aware too. And so while we want to create a mix of housing, both in type and in price point, this really is the area that we think has the highest potential for the highest value. And so pushing density and pushing value here will then allow you to take increment and use it elsewhere in the district and be part of that catalyst. So we had 2 different options. The footprints were the same, but the question was how tall do the buildings go, how much density is there? And we showed kind of 2 different potential valuations for that. While it does kind of take up a lengthy kind of frontage along First Street, there's still a lot of access around the project to the north and to the south, back to the trail. We also drew in kind of this pocket neighborhood. We know there was a proposal earlier for that, got some feedback. We heard that might be coming back, that it wasn't. I'm not exactly sure where that stands right now. But that kind of a concept made a lot of sense to us there. So we did sort of modify a concept, I think have about the same number of units that were shown before, and would look for that to be smaller homes at a more entry-level price point. Working our way then to the south, we kind of get to the center area that I talked about before. So we have Kessler Park, a pretty standard neighborhood park. Looks like it gets a fair amount of use, but not a ton of use. And so the question was, do we develop on that block and then move the park over to the east and combine it with other open space? Do we leave it where it is and develop in between the 2 open spaces? This is an area too where the neighborhood was, I think, kind of divided or of mixed opinion. In talking with the businesses on 3rd Street, they prefer to have more customers closer to them. So they prefer to see development on the park and the park moved over. I think if the park were moved over and integrating it with some of the other recreation and open space amenities, it would be a more powerful place. But I don't know that we really have a strong recommendation one way or the other. I think it's something we can talk about, and I can show some options for both of those kind of scenarios. Coming further south in this kind of Maple area, this was like the Heights. This was one where we think it just a use of residential with kind of townhomes lining First Street, like I talked about before, with vehicular entrances from the back that would basically be below grade, as you can see it from First Street. In larger format residential in the front seemed to kind of fit with this area, so we didn't really show an option for that. And then as you get to the south, the Platte area showed a couple of options for what could occur here, as well as what could occur across this extension of the new street. And I'll kind of talk about that. The issue here is the kind of balance between commercial and residential. South of this, we have the Children's Theater, we have the Brewing Project, both commercial uses, and could build off of that. And this Makers theme could play out here as really kind of the commercial core before it kind of transitioned more into residential. But the residential could kind of start here too. Then the issue is what occurs between the bike path and the street, whether we have that as some kind of active recreation space or whether we have a development in there. As far as the open space itself, we have a few different kind of concepts. One, I talked earlier about getting people down to the river edge. and taking advantage of that unique sandy bottomland. And we show that access point occurring in this area. Up on top of having a unique playground that would kind of play off of the area's history, and I have some images that I'll show here in a minute for what that kind of thing might look like. Obviously, maintaining the bike trail, so we left this alignment as is. This trail is absolutely beautiful if you haven't been out on it. My comment was we have roads in Madison that aren't as nice as this trail, so congratulations to the city for quite an impressive improvement. So the trail alignment is exactly as you see it today, and flanking that then with some open space. Over here, this little open space would be maybe a little more, urbanized, kind of more like a town square than a true park that would really create a great view shed from this project, and also set up this corner for maybe a little bit of commercial on this edge that then links back down over to 3rd Street, kind of keeps a linkage to that commercial district, but the bulk of this building would be residential. And then in here, one thought on the south end in particular is for what we call the destination recreation. So something that isn't currently in the city that would draw people to the area and would also work with the kinds of folks that come to the Brewing Project and some of these other things you already have. One idea we had was deck hockey. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically a hockey court. You don't need ice. You can play year-round. It looked like from looking on the internet, somebody tried to get one going in town a few years ago. It didn't have maybe petered out. I couldn't find any other information about it. But it is a growing sport, and I know you guys love your ice and hockey in the winter, and having a place to continue that in the summer could be really interesting. So for the center, I mentioned a couple of different options. Leaving Kessler Park in place, putting some townhomes to the east of it, and then over here would be this kind of more naturalized playground, or replacing the park with development and moving the neighborhood park over to here. So this would stay the way it is. I think the only thing that we didn't incorporate was the ball field. Not that it couldn't be, but in our plan, we didn't show that. But then it could link with a much larger open space and be more multifunctional. So I think it works either way. As you can see here, you do get a little bit more development, and that also puts more residences next to the existing commercial area, which is a comment that we had. In the Plant and Oxford area, again, kind of mentioned what's the balance between residential and maybe more commercial space, playing up on this maker theme. So this shows a mixed-use building with kind of commercial on the ground floor, 16,000 square feet, where this shows more smaller freestanding commercial buildings. And so when we talk about maker spaces, what are we talking about? I think food is one of them, and again, kind of building off the history and the fact that the brewing project's already there. So bakery, a chocolatier, any number of kind of food and beverage, a distillery could work there. I think arts and crafts type uses would work as well. So anything that we're kind of fabricating, making things and selling them as well. And then this issue of what occurs between the street extension and the bike path. So just to get everybody oriented, these are now turned sideways. North is to our left. So we're kind of coming up Oxford. It currently stops right here. This is the new street coming through. So this first option is this destination active space that I talked about. And we've thrown out the idea of deck hockey. There are other things that could be looked at. Pickleball is a real growing thing, but something that would be unique to the city and draw folks and kind of cater to the same crowds that we're kind of already drawing. Then we start to kind of introduce development, and so the second option is mostly commercial, picking up with what might be across the street if we went more in that commercial game. And then this one is more maybe a little commercial and some residential. I think the thing to think about in looking at this is it does what happens here, it needs to be thought about in relation to whatever option you pick for being across the street. If it's commercial and these are smaller buildings, then putting development across the street where the view isn't as big of an issue for this, that could work. If you pick something more like this format, where you've got a multi-story building and the part of the panache or cachet of living there is view to the river, then if you're going to put something across the street that's going to block that or obstruct that, then that maybe doesn't work as well. And also, how do you kind of handle the parking? I know there's some talk when we're kind of kicking this around with staff about maybe townhouses. I think what concerned us about that is that how would you access those garages? I don't think what you'd want to see as you drive down this new extended Oxford Street is a bunch of garage doors, right? And so we want to make sure that that face remains urban and consistent with the kind of feeling we're trying to create on both sides of the street. So these two things, although we show them separately, really can't be looked at in isolation. We've got to find the right pair of what's happening on one side of the street versus the other. We did put some values on this and studied your TIF plan to see what your kind of expectations were. We kind of had lows and highs, mostly depending on how many units do we have, what kind of valuation. We looked at some existing projects in town to help kind of give us an idea of what things are assessing at, and have this spread of between 46 and 68 million at full build out. And I think the TIF plan estimated about 60 million. So we're kind of bracketing what some of those estimates were at an increment of just shy of $1 million a year, about 350. Last, want to talk about district character, because it isn't enough to just talk about building footprints and massing and density, but excuse me, really understanding what this look and feel is an important part of really getting this correct. And picking up on the heritage is where we kind of went with this. These are some pictures, some of which are from Eau Claire, some of which are from other communities. The Cannery District, as I'm sure you know, there are several of them. It's not unique, but how do you start to kind of play that out in architecture and reflect that? This gives some ideas of that. Of course, the Brewing Project has done a fabulous job with rehabbing their building and adding on to it with that kind of industrial chic feel. It's too bad there aren't any other major buildings like this left that could be reused. That would be helpful, but picking up on those things. And then up in the heights of really picking up on the beautiful steel span bridge that you have in the high bridge, how the architecture can kind of start to reflect that and fit in. This shows some fairly kind of modern things, and maybe not have to be quite this modern, but sort of exposed steel structure would be something to look at that would thematically fit in with that. So from public space, talked about this more naturalized kind of playground. And so these are some images of what other communities have done that would kind of tie into your heritage of lumber and processing with some more naturalistic kind of playground features that could be incorporated and be something unique all by itself. And I saw one of the comments from the neighborhood was wanting stuff for kids that are under 5. Currently, Kessler Park doesn't apparently have such a thing, and I think there's a lot of opportunity to bake some of that into a space like this. And then this, tying back to the river and the fact that you're on the bike trail, and could do both. They actually make bike trailers for kayaks, so you could bike down here, and then having kind of a ramp. This right here is kind of a ramp that you can put a kayak or a canoe on and kind of drag it down rather than having to carry it down as you would negotiate that slope. So that was another thing we really wanted to get the river accessible not only to people but to paddle sports as well. There is an access point of sorts on the other side of the river. It took us a while to find it, kind of behind the bus barn. It's been flooded out obviously several times. Some of the steps are washed out. It's pretty tough to negotiate. And so it doesn't look like it probably gets a lot of use, and a lot more rocks on that shoreline where, like I said, once you get to the bottom here, it's all pure sand. And it'd be really easy to get in and out. So a much better access point than the one you currently have. So next steps are, determining what alternatives make sense to you. Understanding that kind of whatever we draw, the developer is going to tweak it, and that we've been through this process before and understand that, but it's important for you to kind of convey the vision and objectives and ideas of what you want to see accomplished, and really using this to get the private sector interested and kind of get them focused and on track. And it also has the ability too, that if somebody kind of sees this and it isn't what they do, then they're not going to waste their time and waste your time trying to figure it out. And I sometimes have clients that saying, well, why go through a process like this? We have this land, and let's let the development community decide. And while that kind of sounds logical, what ends up happening is that if you have a blank slate and haven't gone through a process like this, then when a developer comes in and says, well, would this work or that work? What the staff is going to say is, well, we don't know. We've never talked about it. We haven't talked about it with the neighborhood. And so what that means is go spend a lot of money and keep throwing stuff on the wall and maybe something will stick. That's not a really inviting proposition for a developer when they can go to places where things like this have been done and know, hey, if I do that, I'm good. So from a developer perspective, kind of certainty and risk aversion are really their primary things. So telling the developer no is not the worst thing you can tell a developer. Telling the developer I don't know actually is the worst thing you can tell a developer. So it's a very worthwhile effort to go through this and be able to provide that guidance and give the staff the confidence of saying, hey, if you kind of bring in a project that meets these objectives, you should get a pretty positive response. So that's why we want to get your input on this, firm up generally what alternatives and objectives you want to meet, and then Aaron can start testing these with developers. We know there's a lot of interest, and employers in the area have a real interest in helping to promote housing here, and then starting to kind of take that through the developer recruitment process. So that's what I've got for a presentation, and at that point I'll turn it over to questions.
Questions, anybody? Comments?
I just want to say that I really do like the incorporation of the use of the river, because I think there's just certain parts of Eau Claire that just haven't utilized it properly. When you drive around, where is the river? And everything's blocking it, and there's no use for it. So I think it was really kind of refreshing to see that you guys have really took that into consideration, whether it's making sure there's access to it, using it for event space or something unique like that. Again, businesses, even housing, to be able to have that view. It's a shame to not have it, but you not use that this year after us. I just wanted to say that was really awesome.
Talk about the neighborhood.
Thank you so much. A couple questions that I have. Well, first of all, just acknowledge my appreciation for the work that you and your firm and for the partnership with staff to bring us to these discussions. Thank you very much. Couple questions. Help me understand what I think I heard, which was trying to create similar types of activities to continue to attract the type of people who are coming already to this district. Is there perhaps opportunities to look at diversifying who might go and enjoy that space? So, for instance, sometimes, just to make sure it's accessible to people of all ages. So that would be my first question, diversification of activities. The second one is, as you know, in your research in this area, there was a significant interest in looking at food security or food insecurity and tying that in with some of the heritage of that district. And I wonder if you could speak to perhaps this area being a solution or being a partner to food insecurity.
Yeah, so to the first point, I think with the open space options that we've laid out, there's a lot of different interest that that would serve in terms of whether you have kids, whether you're an adult, whether you bike, whether you like to climb around and stuff, want to be on the river or what have you, and it's all free and open. So I think it's really inviting to the full public. And we really tried to set up the open space so that while the private development was integrated with it, it didn't look like it was the private development's front yard. It was still very public, very open, very accessible. And while you've got that beautiful bike path, kind of once you get off the High Bridge and come south, it's a nice ride, but there's sort of no there. And so users of the trail now kind of have a destination. So I think it really would kind of draw people from throughout the city and with a variety of interests and a variety of backgrounds. So I think it does address that. As far as the food insecurity, honestly, it's one of the things that I guess we heard it, missed it, or didn't give it enough attention. But I think the ability to include things like community gardens in part of this can certainly be a part of that as well.
I would add in, we've had some significant discussions with the Parks Department, and when the details of the park are eventually determined and starting to be developed, Parks will work closely with the neighborhood to make sure that what they're looking to implement as far as amenities and activities will incorporate what the neighborhood would like to see, what the folks who are there would like to have access to. So that'll be a long-term and a very tightly run discussion and incorporating the neighborhood as part of that process. Overall space, we did a look at the options with Parks and the potential switch of location from Kessel to the other side of First Avenue generates about the same roughly square footage or acreage as its current footprint. The overall green space, when you take into account the river trails and the green space up and down from Madison to the High Bridge, it's about 10 acres of open space. So it is a significant amount of greenfield open space that would still be available under these options for the public to enjoy. In terms of food security, we have had discussions with a potential grocery store operator in the past. That is a target we would like to see and like to try and find if there's an opportunity for the development in this area. It may not be on Oxford, it may be, we look at opportunities on Madison or someplace in the city that can serve that area. A lot of it will be dictated by what space is available, what other development is around, whether it's new construction versus rehab of existing space. But that type of discussion, grocery providers or food providers with low price points are definitely part of what we're looking at for that area.
Just a question on, we're looking at needing about $60 million to get the valuation as far as the TIF is concerned. Is that what we're looking at? Jay?
Yes.
Jay, thank you very much. So we do that. By the way, all the plans look really cool. How many people do you think this would bring in new from the standpoint of residents? You made the comment that the business folks on Third want customers closer, and that's one of the big things here is balancing how many people will we attract new to come and live there, because that will tell you what kind of businesses could live off of that, whether it's a grocery store, a restaurant, a bike shop, whatever. They have to have a customer base that's close by. Do you have any sense of that yet?
I do. Just looking at our previous scenarios, I think overall we're looking somewhere between maybe roughly 250 to 500 units, depending on kind of where the density ends up at. So let's just kind of shoot the middle of there, call it 400, 2 people a unit, 800 people, so maybe 800 to 1,000 possibly. Again, kind of depending on what that ultimate mix of uses would be. I know there were some issues about traffic, and I think one of the nice things about the way this is situated is that while there certainly would be more traffic probably headed north, most of the traffic is really going to be fed kind of through the new street and down maybe a little bit more on First Avenue and out to Madison. I mean, you can't go east, obviously. And there's really nothing that's going to draw people significantly to the west other than to get to Third and maybe go north. So I don't see a lot of traffic kind of permeating through the avenue, through the neighborhood. First Street, we clearly see some increase in traffic, but I don't think it's going to be an endless parade by any means.
What kind of car counts would you think on that? In other words, again, I want to go back to the fact that if you're a business person, you're looking for the car count.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for the backup residence, you're looking for the car count, you're looking for a destination. So you're making some beautiful looking streets, it's great for residencies, but from the standpoint of putting a business there,
Right.
it may not be the best. So tell me about car counts.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's been a long time since I've done that math. I'd have to get back with you. It's an easy calculation to make. It's just been too long since I've looked at the trip generation annual. I don't want to throw out a crazy number and go, oh, I was wrong.
What's Madison Street's car count now?
I have to go back and check the Wisdom map. It is that corridor. I know actually, I take that back, I believe in front of where the Dollar General went, the counts are about 20,000 today. Maybe pushing 25.
We can get you counts on that and on Third.
Yeah, I think that'd be good because that way I think we could see exactly how the traffic will move around the land that we are going to develop, and that'll tell us. And I think give us a good idea of what should go, what can possibly go there. I look forward to that. I know years ago, Madison had 35,000 cars, and I know after the North Crossing it dropped precipitously. So I'd like to see what kind of resurgence we'll get because of that.
Absolutely, we can look that up. I'd also go ahead and maybe comment on the neighborhood listening session that we held last week. So city staff, a number of city staff attended the Upper West Side Housing Association meeting. There were about 30 attendees roughly. It was a very engaged, very vocal group. Had a lot of good feedback and input, both during the meeting and some one-on-one sessions afterwards. Overall theme that we got from the neighborhood association was cautiously supportive of the options in the plan for the Cannery District. Big concerns they had obviously were with increased density, how is traffic flow impacted, and where do the cars park with the new housing things that go in there. So any development plans that come forward would need to address some of those issues. We know engineering is going to be doing a traffic study in that area, so the city will be looking at that as well. Income, another thing that they were concerned about and was brought up was obviously the idea of potential gentrification of the district. So again, talking about mixed income, mixed price points for different facilities, different potential buildings and construction, residential areas, is as how you try to address that. Look at some of the specific themes. Overall, the folks were very supportive and liked the concept of a maker's district. So that theme fits well, and they felt like it fit well. We had several comments that said it seemed to fit well from the history of the area. In terms of the heights, most of the residents did prefer the lower density option. I was listed of the two, both at the meeting and a small poll that we put on through the association's Facebook page, which added an additional point for us. So responses just over the weekend. So they are obviously preferring a little bit lower density in that area. Most were supportive of the shifting of location from Kestrel Park. Comments did include though to ensure that changes or developments were made to make sure that the rest of the neighborhood feels invited to walk through that area to get to the park space and to the riverside. So obviously, again, that would have to be part of the discussion as we look at development plans that go into that area. All are supportive of the commercial balance within the area at Platte. I think more of them preferred option one, which was a mix of residential and commercial. But it was really fairly evenly spread, and there were several who responded that either option was okay with them. So they like the idea of more businesses being in the area, and the theme of makers, again, was supportive for that. In terms of the riverside, that thin area between the potential Platte development and the trail, overwhelmingly the residents preferred the idea of a destination recreation point, that staying urban or open space. That was by far and away the biggest response. When you drill down into some of the responses, there was a little bit of a generational divide on that. Younger attendees and folks who were at the meeting actually preferred the idea of some residential being built along the river. They liked the idea of being able to sit, having an apartment as close to the river as possible. Older generational attendees preferred that to remain the open space, so there was a little bit of a split based on age with that question. But again, overall, they're very engaged, and they're glad to see that their thoughts and their voice are being taken into account. We will continue to do that as we move forward.
Was there any particular considerations with all the units, like purchasing versus rentals? Like, would you want to see there to be a mix of that, like townhomes or condos that can be purchased, and then developments that are just for rental?
I think a lot of that will ultimately be decided by the developers, what they prefer to do. Obviously, the pocket neighborhood would be intended to be single-family homes for purchase. That was the intent of a project going in there, and the folks that presented the pocket neighborhood concept have come back and have pulled back, so we're not really sure where they stand on that parcel, but I think the concept that they were looking to do, which is a smaller home, smaller footprint, affordable price points within that area, single-family homes is still a solid way to go for that development. We are looking for folks who might be interested in doing the same type of concept in that area. I'm guessing that would likely be probably the primary location that would be for sale homes. I would expect the rest of it to be likely be rentals.
Although I think that townhouses provide an opportunity for ownership too. So, that's a preference you have, and we develop over time, we kind of look for that. But that type of unit lends itself well to ownership. Condos are still tough to do with a kind of multi-unit configuration of the building. These some financing and other requirements, both on the developer and then bringing the buyer in. So since the recession, it's not been quite what it was before.
Yeah, because I know, I believe I just saw recently that condos are friendly, and I believe they're trying to pass a resolution to qualify for FHA loans. So that could actually be a really good benefit for purchaser of the townhomes, for instance, because, as people are moving here, single young professionals, single family homes might be out of their range, but having more of an urbanized, that style condo or townhome might be really desirable for them to purchase. I'm thinking of the medical community and stuff, people moving in here from different areas, they're accustomed to a different style. And if it's at a good price point, and now that you can get FHA, or it looks like you'll be able to get FHA financing for that, which you hadn't been in the past, that could be a little bit of a game changer. I just know from some of my residents I have that I've recently moved in, whose next step is home ownership. They've mentioned that, they love to buy their apartment or have something similar to that. And now with that FHA thing, I think it's just something to consider and keep in mind if that actually does go well, which I believe it is. That opens up, a different type of buyer for that market that's normally hasn't been there because of those financing constraints.
Just another question on valuation. You showed $48 million to $68 million. What were the biggest reasons that there was such a switch? What was removed or changed that would cause about a $20 million switch in value?
Just primarily number of units. So in the Heights, there was quite a difference on the kind of two alternatives that we showed. And so that's the primary thing. And unit type as well. We have the townhome units assessing higher than the units in the building. Now, if they were condos, the values would only go up. One of the frustrating things, this from a TIF perspective, it's been that, before the recession, everybody was building condos. The identical building as condo versus rental. Condo, you're going to get an assessment on, pretty close to its sale price. And so let's take, what we see more in the Madison area, where you have these fairly nice high-end two-bedroom unit, granite countertops, the whole works. That's going to assess at $250,000 to $350,000. That same unit only assesses as a rental at $120,000 because the expenses come out and just the way the assessments are done on owner versus rental kind of thing. So if we could get more ownership up here, we should only see those values increase all that much more. So from a financial perspective, it's certainly something to encourage as well.
So the big thing is, did it have anything to do with the units are built away from the river as opposed to close to the river?
Not really. other than maybe the heights, it was really more based on unit type. Otherwise, we kind of ascribed the same value. And I think we lowered it a little bit, knowing that there might be some affordable housing in here too, maybe another Section 42 project or whatever. So we just kind of averaged it out rather than deciding, well, this is where the affordable would be versus not. The only place we kind of made that decision or had that recommendation was in the heights to maximize that value. How you would bring in affordable units if you reduce something like Section 42 or other offsets through the TIF or housing fund, those could be integrated through the rest of the project. So we just kind of took an average of that.
Any other questions or comments? Just one, please.
Yeah. So with respect to the heights and the construction there, the density versus maybe you didn't get into the discussions of the value of the TIF, values that need to be generated. But were there discussions about with the destination recreation facilities and offsets between, okay, well, if you want recreation down here, we have to have more housing up top. Does that engage in community discussion at all?
Well, when we met with the community, we didn't have these concepts. So I guess I'll leave that to Aaron. So we didn't have that kind of discussion about where that is.
Yeah. At the neighborhood association meeting, they did ask why did we reduce the green space to the extent that we did, and the obvious answer came back to the impact to the TIF generation, TIF increment, and TIF. The green space is great, everybody loves it, but there's a cost to it, and paying for that cost has an impact on valuations. If you look at the range up there, you'll notice that the Riverside sites, which is the location that at zero value, it's a destination theme recreation area, publicly owned, so there's no property tax generated at all, versus some level of either mixed use or commercial development on that, which increases the tax value. We didn't get into well, if we do something here, we take away here, we didn't get to that level. That may be more handled as we actually start fleshing out the development of the plan and start looking at moving the properties and doing individual levels. You probably see more of that as we implement whatever we decide, whatever direction we should go.
Yourself, thank you for the information. I like Mary said, I really enjoyed how you highlighted the river lowlands, and that we had not been perhaps appreciated, as much as it could have in the past. And I think your emphasis also on how to tie in and thinking about the businesses on Third, and reminding us that there are those businesses on Third, and that this is perhaps a little bigger than just the district, and how that ties in is very good, important point. And then, we've had a lot of talk about the traffic and the traffic flows, and so providing a little more focus on perhaps, where that traffic should flow, I think this was also very helpful. So that's my feedback on it. I really appreciated and seeing it. Two questions or areas in mind if you could drill down on a little bit. One is the distinction between a neighborhood park and a community park. Kessler's a neighborhood park right now, and the original plan really was for a community park, and the community parks are different than a neighborhood park. And we're trying to blend those two things together, and the community parks generally have something that's a little unique to them. When you look at most of them, they each have something a little bit different, that they're not all the same. So maybe a little deeper dive on that distinction between where we're replicating the function of a neighborhood park, but then, the community aspects. So that would be one. The other has to do with the businesses. The natural progression of this and the relatively easier piece is the housing, right? And doing more housing. And you talked about maker and maker spaces. Can you give us a little deeper dive on, what do we do to make that unique and special and that destination? Chair DeRosa talked about destination being, one of the key components, and anything more you could provide us on how we make that a destination that's unique and different than some other place, in the city of Eau Claire that is going to bring in the type of maker businesses that you're describing to, perhaps at a higher level. Thank you.
In terms of the park differences, as you noted, we really just try to sort of address either by leaving Kessler Park where it is or relocating it but maintaining a lot of the same functions, except possibly, as I mentioned, with the ball field there. Wanted something that would serve those kind of daily needs. As I noted, there was a comment from the public about stuff for smaller kids, and Kessler Park really doesn't address it. I think we constructed Kessler Park, whether it stays in its current location or moved, that those features can be added. Community park, in our sense, that is more of this kind of climbing and those activities versus a lot of ball fields. There isn't a lot of, let's say, team sports kind of orientation here for basketball and baseball and softball. It's really more kind of come and go with maybe some unique features that don't exist elsewhere in the city, but that the neighborhood could also benefit from as well. So we weren't thinking about it so much in terms of neighborhood versus community, more a matter of what features and facilities are offered and the different draws that those might have. So I don't know if that really answered your question, but we were kind of, I think, in kind of parks planning parlance, and I don't propose to be an expert in that necessarily, but when their definitions of neighborhood versus community versus regional start with how big is it, and then there's also then a lot of list of facilities that tend to be more active recreation. I think here we are kind of more, I guess I'd sort of call it passive, or climbing around isn't necessarily a passive activity, but as opposed to these things that are really aimed at big team sports and drawing big crowds and a lot of group activity, which would be more individual. And so I guess that's what I'm asking, answer I can give. And we did kind of describe in our memo what some of those features might include. As far as, go ahead.
So on that, I was just wondering if you've given thought to this open space for parks and something that, again, is a little different, and like a sculpture garden,
right?
Or something that is the only place in the city of Eau Claire where perhaps there's a sculpture garden, or something that makes it a little bit different from a open space recreation area.
Right, and I think if you picked up on this kind of a theme, I'm not aware of anything like that elsewhere in town. And certainly this river feature and the access to the lowlands. I mean, I think there's a lot of unique things here that are not only appropriate for this space, but are unique to the city as a whole, and we give people experiences that they don't currently have available to them. And so we try to think of it that way, but not duplicate it. You got some beautiful parks, not the least of which is that far away. The name's escaping me, one kind of around the Oxbow Horseshoe. Thank you. So a lot of different recreation already available. There's no sense of duplicating any of that. We felt that there was a little bit too much overlap with the previous plan and some of the features it was offering versus what we were trying to focus on here. In terms of the makerspace, you're right, that's going to be the tougher part. The market is still pretty robust right now for housing. Commercial gets a little bit more difficult, and especially now when there may be a couple of buildings that might have some reuse potential in the short term, but there's nothing kind of left, if you will, like what the brewing project had. And new construction is expensive, so finding the right use that can afford new construction and how that might play out, I think will be a bit of a challenge. And that's where those rooftops certainly are going to help the new ones, as well as what the neighborhood already has. part of that destination. So whether it's that contour or the access to the river, all of those are going to help draw people to this area and strengthen this relationship to Mayo and what a power center that is. So I think that's just something we'll kind of have to see how that plays itself out, what those costs look like, who those users might be, because I do think it's going to be more kind of user-driven in a way, if you will, than developer-driven. No one's going to come in and kind of spec that space, but a chocolatier who's ready to kind of grow out of something, who has a reputation already in this area or success in another area that wants to, in Eau Claire or outside Eau Claire, that wants to kind of grow their operation, or a bakery, or somebody who's doing both retail and a wholesale sort of business out of the same location, are probably the better targets to kind of drive that aspect of it. And same with kind of those who either make furniture or art, that kind of thing as well.
I would probably add in regards to commercial, we do have a couple of local businesses who are looking at expansion and are keenly interested in the cannery district. They would fit in very well with this maker's concept. And they're watching how this process develops, and we'll be carrying the conversation on with them as we move forward.
Very good. Thanks very much. Excellent report. Steve.
If I could just, not so much a question, but just a response, pointing out, if you could go to your slide on estimated values. When you made this point before on how you look at the plan for your values and use the different spaces. So if you look at the low column and assume riverside sites as park space and not a development site, you've got a 0 there. But I think you could focus on 2 other potential development sites, one on Platte and Oxford, which would then be immediately to the west of it, if I've got that definition correct. So now that becomes a site that has direct views of the park and Chippewa River. And if you shift even 5 million of that over and now look more towards the high side and say that's more of an 8 to 9 million site, benefited by park across Oxford. And then the other one, was mentioned by the presenters, the other being the Heights. So, you pick up another 9, 10, potentially million there at a higher development. Basically, have your extra 14 to 15 million. Then even on the low side, keeping the Riverside site as a park development, and you're at about that 60 million project.
Yep.
Obviously, you could get there in different ways, but those are the ones that jump out at me.
That's going to be the whole decision. That's what we're doing. Okay. Very good. Thank you much. The next item, discussion and overview of projects submitted in response to the Block 7 and Liner Sites request for proposals. Aaron?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. As you're aware, we have 4 proposals that were submitted for the RFP that was sent out for the Block 7 Liner sites, 2 responses for each. And today our plan is just to go over the highlights of those projects site by site, just talk about the basic elements for comparison and give you kind of a starting intro to what projects were submitted for the 2 locations. We are still working on the financial analysis. We're looking to get some additional information from the proposals on the finance side. A lot of this is related back to the TIF question and TID 8. We're at a point where with the life and the extent of the TIF as what it has capacity to still add to increment to the area, we're in a very fine balancing act of what incentives or what TIF funds can be advanced on projects versus what can be recouped. So we have to make sure, and city staff wants to make sure that they have a very solid understanding of the financial impact of the TIF of these projects and a couple of others that have been approved in the district, which is why at this point we're just still looking to do kind of an overview, answering questions, get some feedback from the board, but not looking to make a decision just yet, and staff is not making a recommendation on a project just yet. So let's start out with the first one. This is for the Liner site. So this is the proposal from the Children's Museum, and it is in partnership with a commercial business as well. Just gonna flip forward a little bit. This is the site layout, the existing parking garage, north bar still on the right-hand side. Obviously, the Children's Museum is the primary feature in this space, and then looking at a mixed-use restaurant space on the lower half of that. So it does provide some increment to the TIF with the commercial business, but provides a new location on the prime site for the Children's Museum's relocation. This is looking at the angle of that site from Corn Gallery and Barstow. This would be showing the elevation of the Children's Museum. It's a tall two-story structure, and again providing approximately 23,500 square feet, and then drop in the business section, the commercial piece, that adds an additional 27,000 square feet. The proposal for the commercial side is they're looking at a combination of restaurant, office, and restaurant ground floor, office on the next two floors, and obviously the museum would take the full section of the airspace. The location provides some access for bus drop-off on the front, has open space in the front as well for activities for kids, and it is attached to the garage. They would intend to use some penetrations in the parking deck to handle their parking needs, and will be agreement worked out with the city for that. But that is the basic concept of what they're looking at.
Is there enough parking? I noticed that if they wanted a couple of cuts for
There
everybody.
is some excess parking available. We talked with traffic on that. Obviously, that would be a negotiation of how that can be worked out with the city staff and engineering, but there is some capacity for that. So, any questions or thoughts on that space? Okay, let's go move on to the next one. This is the merge proposal for the lighter site. Same space again. This is about just over half an acre space. This one is a mixed-use development. This is the concept building that they're looking at. There's actually two small, second small building behind that would provide walkouts. Their concept is commercial ground floor. Would be a mix of restaurant, micro retail. Their top two floors they propose as office space, and then the space in between floors 2 through 5 would be residential. They're looking at approximately 91 units of studio, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Their affordable low income mix, they're estimating about 60% of the units will meet the guidelines we assessed for 80% of the same type of rent level you find for folks who make 80% of the county median income. So they're some attainable housing within this process, within this project. This is not a lifetime project, anything like that, but the ones and the twos or the studios and the 1 bedrooms would be a little more affordably priced. I'm just looking at some of the other. There we go. I'm just watching your slide. So this is the site plan. As you can see, the main areas there on the right, running right south, and then the small secondary building between the walk-ups is listed as building B. Parking-wise, they would anticipate utilizing the parking structure to provide some of their parking, and they are also the developer who's redeveloping the railroad lot, which will have underground and surface parking. So they would also seek to utilize some of that parking to provide the needs for the facility there. Just that's kind of a breakdown of some of the mix of space. As we talked, the commercial space for merge would be totaling about 31,744 square feet of commercial space, including restaurant and office. And again, using the existing building structure. They are looking to incorporate a number of sustainable elements. That first picture is mass timbering. It's a composite timber structure that they're looking to use in the facility. It provides a green element to the project. We'll kick up to the next one. They're also looking to see how they can incorporate recharging stations for vehicles, solar, and other green elements to provide some sustainability. Again, this is another piece of the project narrative. Next one. This is where we have some of the proposed rental rates for the units. Again, these fall within the guidelines that we have set for 80% LMI for the studios, the micro ones, and the smaller one-bedroom apartments. Any basic questions on this?
What's the overall valuation?
That's something we're still working on. I can send that out to the board later. I don't want to put off the top of my head. I don't have that in front of me. We will be providing, the next round will provide full financial.
That's fine.
But they have submitted a number that they're willing to commit to in terms of the financial valuation. Right. So those are the two for the liner side. The next two are for the Block 7 site. This first one's for moving out. So this is an organization that specializes in low-income housing. So they do light-type projects. Variety of projects have been done throughout the state. What they're looking to do here is 3 units, 2 of them connected, totaling 40 to 50 units of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. Excuse me, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. 90% of their units will be affordable and will meet the 20, will meet the WEDA requirements. They will be applying for lifetime credits and will meet the WEDA requirements. They will have a mix of 30 to 60% county median income type units. So they are truly looking to do this as an affordable project.
Not at all.
Oh, yeah, just one. Next one. Go ahead. Push, yeah.
Sorry. Oh, no. No, I can't. All right.
So this is a site outline. We're talking a large connected two-lane structure on the left-hand side, and then a single standalone structure along with Barstow Street. There is a lot in the southeast corner that would not be developed. They would leave that open for development by a commercial project of some type or potential expansion down the road. They're looking to utilize surface parking. There are 46 stalls of surface parking listed in that site plan to service the facility. Again, we're talking about 3-story structures. So this is some exterior renderings of what they anticipate the facility to look like and elevations. So it has some similar elements to what's already going on in the downtown area. This would be the smaller standalone structure on Barstow. So, any questions on that project?
What's the reasoning for leaving? They want to buy the whole lot 7 and they just want to keep some of it empty and just in case they could get something else there?
Part of it is, the idea is there is an interest in doing commercial lighting with this, and they recognize that as well. Most light-type projects, they have a difficult time incorporating commercial into the residential and still qualify for light-type. Now, they do propose to do some reserve space on the first level to do work-live, kind of work-live apartments. So a small business entrepreneur who's running a startup out of their home, their ground floor units are intended to be sized to help facilitate that type of an operation. Somebody doing a home-based business that needs a little additional space. But they don't do commercial. They have no interest in doing commercial. So anything like that would be through a partner or would be sold off to somebody else to develop. That's outside of their parameter, and honestly, it would make their application for life type of challenge. It's hard to separate the two when you're looking at applying for tax credits. Next presentation, and the last one, this again is also for Block 7 on our site. This is the proposal from Commonweal. We are looking at 4 structures within the Barstow site. As you can see, Here's the location, proposed location. Kind of a pinwheel configuration with an open courtyard in the middle. Their proposal, as it says, is estimating 182 units of studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. A little closer view of the configuration. They will look at doing commercial on the ground floor along Barstow, which is this section. They're estimating about 10,000 square foot of potential retail space or commercial space along that corridor on the ground floor of Barstow. They're looking to address the parking with underground parking within that site, which has been a preference in the downtown area. And their proposal shows 170 stalls in a below grade to service their site. Here's some exterior elevations. They are looking at a 4-story development to provide a little additional density. And again, the architecture and the design does fit in well with what's going on in that area. Some more exterior renderings. This would be the area along Barstow with commercial ground floor. And some other exteriors, as these would be the exclusive residential facilities. It's not cooperating very well. But that is the general presentation of Commonwealth's proposal for 7. Now we will be looking for comments or feedback from the board. We do have 2 businesses that are represented here, so from Commonwealth and from the Children's in our hand. If you had any questions to direct to them, they would be available. We just be looking for feedback or thoughts on the proposals.
Comments, anybody? Well, not so much a comment as a question. So thanks to all the involved concerns for coming forward again and putting ideas out there for this site. So with regards to the last proposal we just saw, comment likely says that there's a significant amount of commercial, which good, right? That's awesome. It's going to be new construction, right? So costs are a little higher. I was curious if anybody could sort of elaborate a little bit on what strategies might be employed to ensure that the viability sounds like too significant of a way to say it, of that commercial space, and ensure that we're able to draw into those areas.
Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Stuart Schaefer, reporting to town. The experience we've had over at Haymarket Landing with the commercial space has been a little bit of a struggle, as you noted, as going by there. But I think things have gotten a lot better. Things have been moving forward as quickly as we thought. Progression of downtown, but it's coming along now. We're getting a lot more inquiries, and the fundamental difference here is these would be smaller spaces. At Haymarket Landing, the smallest space we had was 2,500 square feet. It was on the corner of Olson and Ice Cream. Now occupies that. After that, all the space is at 3,000 square feet and larger, and 90 feet deep. So now we're talking about a space that we have 45 feet. We'll be able to rent 800 and 900 square foot commercial spaces, which seems to be what we've been getting a lot of demand for. So we think by having smaller commercial spaces, that's really what the demand was going in the Haymarket Landing project 5-6 years ago. We really didn't know what the demand downtown was because there was no new space available to begin with. Got a lot of great experience. I'm sorry, the presentation didn't work out better. We had an actual flyover kind of thing we could send out there for to look at the architects actually do the job.
Stuart, can you stay up for a minute? Can you comment on what you're seeing for the demand on residential housing? I mean, what we've seen today is a lot of new units coming on, being proposed, a lot of new apartment units coming on board. So maybe just comment on the demand that you're seeing out there.
Yeah, we manage over 200 units in downtown right now, and have a pretty good feel for demand. It's not endless by any means, but if the project is done properly, there is additional demand for residential units in downtown. I don't think people want to break 200 units online all in the same month, but our plan would be to bring them on in a phased manner over the course of 2 to 3 years, and we feel pretty positively that can be absorbed and can actually create more of a neighborhood down there. There's already down the neighborhood, there's a neighborhood association that meets on our patio a couple times a year. And by adding another 100 to 200 units in that same area, we feel it's the appropriate land use, and we feel that where the demand might not be there now for that many units, that it could build based on that kind of a feel for a neighborhood.
And in addition to the 500 that was being proposed to the Canterbury District too, is there enough demand for all of that?
Any our market considerations that are retained that's going to be a little more challenging, frankly. That's not the demand. We don't set the demand over there to be as great as it is in the center. Amenities, Phoenix Park being the biggest amenity of all. That's where people want to live. They want to live near Phoenix Park. When they call up on the phone, you have some apartment by Phoenix Park. Those are full. Would you like to live together? I said, no. Tell me when you got to put me on the list. So I think we feel the demand is at this point focusing around Phoenix Park as the Canterbury District is improved. Hopefully that same feeling will transcend across the river. But we don't sense it there now. It's in the Phoenix Park.
I think that was a really valid point, because I was kind of thinking the same thing because of all the apartments being proposed in Cannery, and then more units here, and that doesn't include apartments that are being built in other areas. Do we know, like Erin, how many units are we short? Is there a number? What is does Eau Claire have a goal? Like how many units do we need to kind of level that playing field? Because I think finding that out would be a really good guideline for even for developers. Like, okay, wow, we're getting to that point where the demand is not going to be as high, and that's going to drive down your prices. Then right now, rentals, as we all know, have gone up. I work in this business; it's pretty crazy what I can get for rents. But that's because the demand is so high and the stock is so low. Once that shifts, you might not be able to. You're not going to have as high demand. You might not be able to get those rents that you have in the performance. That would be my concern for the developers, as you see that shift. If you were planning on, 2 bedrooms at $1,800 a month, and now that demand's different, you have more competition out there, you might be only getting $1,400 a month or $200 or $1,600. That makes a big difference, across the board at the end of the year. So I think that would just be something really beneficial to maybe look into and do a little bit of digging if you don't have those numbers to figure out how many units do we need. And then as these new areas come up and we're starting to decide, what developers we want putting in, some of it might not be for us.
That is something that the housing task force has. If you're asked, I don't know that we've come up with a specific number in the housing gap, but it's definitely being looked at. I also had the different developments are also looking at different price points when we talk about the Canterbury District compared to some of the others. So they're not all looking to sell in the same market at the same rent levels, and I think that provides some diversity as well.
Thanks for addressing these questions and for being a good partner in this for a long time. You mentioned bringing apartments online. You would want to bring them all in one step, right? I would assume that's generalized to apply to everything in this project. We're several steps ahead of sort of a go-ahead, but if you had a go-ahead at a given date, what would be your timeline after that to getting this up and running, roughly?
Well, if you look at the project, it's very complicated with the underground work, which is again the part of what you see built in Eau Claire right now. You're not seeing high quality projects built right now with underground work, and elevators and whatnot. You're seeing a lot of foreign units built that have temporary parking. So it complicates a little bit, but the idea would be it's probably building kind of half, not 4 buildings, but build half the parking structure, build 2 of the residential buildings at that time. You would phase those 2 when we come online, maybe 4 to 6 months before the other. So that may, in an ideal situation, that starts next spring. We're online leasing apartments early 2021. Those 2 buildings come online throughout 2021. Then the other half the parking structure is starting late 2021. With the construction starting, and then those units coming online later in 2022, and even as far as 2023, as far as the actual units being ready for lease. All that construction though would make that down the timeline, and to do that, construction would actually start next spring. Otherwise, push all that. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just one, and that we're obviously very appreciative of the work and effort that's gone into all 4 proposals. We're still working through, from a staff perspective, numbers and things to be able to bring back some recommendations to you. We hope to have that today, but there's still some work to be done in that. Recognizing that the work and the effort that's been put in by all these developers, we'd like to be able to move as quickly as we can. So that's my gentle way of saying we might be calling a special meeting before the October meeting if we can do some things that just maybe in a few weeks matters in terms of timing. And so watch your calendars and provide whatever flexibility you can if we are able to call a special meeting and facilities forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Anything else on this area? Anything else?
No, that's all. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to the Executive Director's report. Mr. Executive Director, anything to report?
I would add that kind of following on the comment of the Cannery District, we're still seeing a lot of interest in that area. We've had a number of inquiries of folks who like what they've heard is potentially going on, have an interest in seeing what they could potentially do in that area, what sort of development they want to do, how it would fit plans. So it's exciting to see the interest that's coming in there. Keep everybody posted on that.
They're all good motions or proposals. They're very impressive. All right, any announcements or correspondence? Any fan mail from our admirers? No, none? Oh, what a bummer. Okay, the next meeting, a scheduled meeting, is October 16th. One never knows, but I think that's a good point because we need to move fast on a lot of this stuff, appropriately fast. So any other comments or questions? If not, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you. We made it.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689 or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715